Shadow Minister Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. So for several months now, the Prime Minister has been ferociously attacking their lordships in the other place, simply for doing their constitutional duty by seeking to revise and improve this bill. And tonight we see the evidence of why it is so important that they did just that. And I would like to put on record my thanks to the noble Lord Brown for his tenacity in securing a significant concession, and it is a concession, which promises that Afghans in the UK who have put forward credible claims of evidence of a connection to Afghan specialist units will not be deported to Rwanda. Now, this hasn't gone as far as we would want it to, but at least the government, albeit begrudgingly, has inched towards doing the right thing by standing by some of those who so bravely stood by us in the face of the Taliban. We owe them a debt of gratitude, and it is a great shame that the government, and in particular the Prime Minister, first turned its back on those we promised sanctuary to by cancelling flights from Pakistan, then spent months resisting Lord Brown's efforts to prevent these brave Afghans from being sent to Rwanda, despite repeatedly being pressed to do so by our armed forces to do the right thing, and now, finally, having to be dragged kicking and screaming to where we find ourselves this evening. Even this afternoon, the Minister's response to my honourable friend, the member for Walthamstow, who's not in a place at the moment, was revealing. She raised in detail a case of her constituent who supported British efforts but whose family was stuck in Afghanistan, and yet the Minister couldn't even bring himself to reassure my honourable friend that he would meet with her or even look into the specifics of that case. That's why it'll be so important for us to hold the government to account on this concession, because it's so difficult to take what ministers say at face value. Turning now to the amendment in the name of Lord Anderson, I find it staggering that ministers still haven't conceded on this very basic point, that this House is not just trying to legislate that Rwanda is safe now, in other words, that white is black and black is white, but that Rwanda is safe in perpetuity. The noble Lord Anderson was right in what he said in the other place this evening, that this is a post-truth bill. You cannot possibly legislate for something which is in the lap of the gods. Now, I spoke earlier about the dangerous and turbulent world in which we live, and the threat that at any point the situation in Rwanda could change radically, just as it could in any other country. But let us not forget that just 6 years ago, I will give way.
The Labour leadership is its inconsistency. But will he just confirm that in the last decade, Rwanda is seen to be so unsafe that the UN has rehoused in Rwanda safely 30,000 refugees from other countries?
Well, I thank the honourable member for his intervention, and I'm very glad that he asks about what's happened in the last decade. Because let's not forget that just 6 years ago, 11 refugees were shot dead by the Rwandan police for protesting about food shortages, as reported by the UN. So I thank the honourable member for that point, because I think he makes the point clearly for me, that 6 years ago, 11 refugees were shot dead. I'd welcome his comments on that point. Does he want to intervene again?
There's 30,000. I'm sorry about that incident, but the 30,000 refugees, 30,000 refugees have been safely. 30,000 refugees have been safely rehoused in Rwanda. It is deemed to be safe by the United Nations. It is deemed to be safe by pretty much everybody apart from the Labour Party. That is the point.
The whole point of this is that we do not have a crystal ball in this House. The evidence of what happened 6 years ago should clearly give us some cause for concern. All that this amendment seeks to do is create a position whereby the Independent Monitoring Committee, handpicked by the government, is able to advise the Home Secretary on laying a statement, and that is absolutely fair enough. So I simply cannot... I will give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I was listening carefully to the intervention that he took that referred to the last decade and the 30,000. But of course, is my honourable friend aware that within the past 12 months, the UK has accepted a refugee from Rwanda?
I thank my honourable friend, and it's not just one refugee. Many refugees are taken from Rwanda to this country, which really does beg the question as to how safe that country can be. But all the amendment seeks to do is trust but verify. It puts a mechanism in place which is the kind of mechanism which is embedded in thousands and thousands of pieces of legislation that are on the statute book. So I simply cannot understand why the government can't simply accept this amendment and enable the Home Secretary to allay a statement on whether or not Rwanda is safe or unsafe. That would provide important safeguards, and of course it is not in any way a wrecking amendment, just like all of the other amendments that the government has rejected. They do not prevent flights from taking off. Madam Deputy Speaker, at his press conference this morning, the Prime Minister boasted about the progress that he's supposedly been making to stop the Tory small boats chaos. And yet, as he stood at that very lectern, it emerged that small boat crossings have increased by 24% compared to the same period last year. Next, he refused to give details about the operationalisation of the Rwanda scheme, saying that, and I quote, "we will not be giving away sensitive operational detail which could hinder all the progress made to date." Or so he thought, because it subsequently emerged that one of his ministers had left behind under some chairs in the front row a secret document entitled Official Sensitive, which included, wait for it, operational details of how the scheme will work. You simply could not make it up, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yet another day of chaos, empty boasts and shambolic incompetence. But to be fair to the Prime Minister, there was one point he made in his press conference that we on these benches did agree with. In response to a question from the media, he clearly stated that the test for this policy will not be whether a few symbolic flights take off, as his former friend and the Immigration Minister had previously said, the former Immigration Minister, but, in the Prime Minister's words, success is when the boats have been stopped. Well, that's how he wants to be judged, and that, I can assure the House, is how we on these benches will judge him and how the public will judge him too. For 2 years now, we've been urging the Prime Minister to stop the boasts and instead start stopping the Tory boats' chaos. But sadly, he has chosen to ignore us on both fronts. Instead, we need Labour's plan to redirect the Rwanda money into a cross-border police unit, to smash the criminal gangs upstream, and a returns and enforcement unit to remove those who have no right to be here, reversing the decline in removals that we have seen under this government, because only Labour's plan can fix our country's broken asylum system. And only Labour's plan can restore order at our border. Those benches opposite, they don't want to hear it, but that is the reality of the situation that we're in, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much, and I hope that every member opposite will join me in the division lobbies this evening.